So, before we get started on the Parsha of the week, which we will be learning together from Sunday through Wednesday, the Ramban, in his introduction to Sefer Vayikra, Leviticus, tells us what the book is all about. And I want to give you sort of the Ramban's big picture of the first three books of the Chumash, three books of the Torah, so that you have an idea of where we're going. So the Ramban says the first book of the Torah, which is called Bereshit. Bereshit means what? Beginning. Means beginning. Yeah, in the beginning. Sefer Bereshit really is about the beginning. The beginning, the creation of the universe, the creation of human beings, of animals, of civil society, of everything else. So we are talking about the Sefer Bereshit is about the book of creation, the creation of everything. When we get to Shmot, which is the second book, he calls it Sefer HaGeula, the book of redemption. Why redemption? Because the Ramban says the whole purpose of the book is to teach us how we were able to reconnect divine presence, God's connection to us. The book doesn't, now don't get confused. In English we call the book what? Exodus, which means what's the main part of the book? Leaving Egypt. But if you do that, then you are stuck with 2/3 of the book not complete yet. Right? They leave in the first third of the book. You have 2/3, the rest of the book. What happens then? What happens throughout Exodus, the book of Shemot? What happens? Anybody?
Yeah, the brothers.
They what?
The brothers conspire against.
That's the beginning. That's in. So they go to Har Sinai, get the Torah, and then what? They build the Mishkan. The Ramban says what allows the connection of the Shekhinah to the Jewish people is the Mishkan. That's why he calls it redemption. It is the process of building the Mishkan. Getting out of Egypt was a step in the right direction. Getting the Torah is another step. But building the Mishkan is essentially wrapping everything up. So then we end up with Leviticus, the book Vayikra. So what does he say there? I don't know, I'm just asking. I'm kidding. Right? So I want to share this with you. Because I always had a difficult time with understanding the book of Leviticus. So the Ramban writes, and he says, this book is the Torah of the Kohanim and Levim. It is the laws regarding priests and the Levites. And we learn about the Korbanos, Kulan, all the issues that deal with sacrifices, and Mishmeret HaMishkan, and the keeping or guarding of the Mishkan. Because the one book we had describing the Galus, which is exile. You say, what exile? The disconnect between the Shekhinah and Hashem. And he said, then we have a book that tells us how to reconnect, which is the Mishkan, right? And he says, Hishlimo binyan oel moed v'chvod Hashem. And then we're telling us now, שיהיו הקורבנות כפרה להם ולא יגרמו העוונות לסילוק השכינה. That what? This book is teaching us how to repair the broken connection if we sin. The book of Vayikra is teaching us, since now we have a connection with Hashem, if we sin, we seem to break that connection. And Vayikra is telling us, how do you reconnect once you broke it? Right? You sin, so what do you have to do? You have to bring a sin offering. You bring a korban. You bring a sacrifice. You have to be tahor, pure. Right? There's certain things you can do, certain things you can't do. All these things are a way to reconnect the divine presence that was broken due to our actions. That is the purpose of Sefer Bereshit. So he says, therefore, this book deals with the laws of the Kohanim, that they have to stay holy, and they have to make sure not to be metame, to bring impurities into the Mishkan, and that they have to make sure that they follow all the rules, right? That there are boundaries even within there, and it tells them how to, what sort of sacrifices we offer, and how do you offer each one of them. And he says, and that's how. This is the purpose of the book of Vayikra. Okay, question? Yeah.
It seemed, maybe this is overly simplistic, but it seems like especially the last parsha wasn't so much how to reconnect after you sin. It seemed like it was mostly things that you can't, it was a list of sins of things that you can't do. So,
like what? Give me an example.
Well, so
in Parshat Kedoshim, you're talking about Kedoshim.
Right.
So Kedoshim, it starts out to say, Moshe, Hashem says to Moshe, speak to Bnei Israel, speak to the children of Israel, and tell them what?
You shall be holy.
Shall be holy. You shall be holy. That is, you are a nation that are supposed to remain in a state of holiness. How do you become holy?
And then he goes on to do some of them are positive things that's what I was going to say, is that it seems like a lot of them are, it's not things that you should do, it's things that you can't do, like you shall not.
So we have two categories for that, right? We call them prescriptive commandments and prohibitive commandments. Mm-hmm. Prescriptive, it prescribes certain behavior, and prohibitive, it prohibits certain actions. Right. So those are the categories of all the mitzvahs. They either fall in the category of prohibitive commandments or prescriptive. And there's always more prohibitive than prescriptive, in general. Mm-hmm. Right? We say there's 365 mitzvahs that are prohibitive. So there's 365 commandments that are things that you should not do. And there are 248 that you should do, prescribing behavior. Right. And some of them are double. Mm-hmm. They're both positive and prescriptive and prohibitive.
Really?
There are some.
Which ones? Or what's an example?
Like Shabbos. You have a mitzvah to Zechorot Yom HaShabbat, and Kadesh Yom HaShabbat, Zechorot Yom HaShabbat. One of them is prescriptive. There's things you have to do Kiddush, right? There's things that not to do malacha.
So part of that mitzvah is things to do and things not to do.
Correct. Sometimes there's like that. Mm-hmm. There are other examples, but sometimes you have a prohibitive that is nitak la'aseh, but that's a separate category that I don't want to get into. So it gives us a long list of things, which Kedoshim is one of my favorite parshas. They're all my favorite parshas, but it gives us all sorts of rules. And it ends with, we should probably look at the end, because it's going to connect right away to what we're dealing with.
Can I go on read the question?
Yes, sure.
How comes in Jerusalem the parsha is 1 week ahead?
It's the other way around. Why in Chutz La'aretz they're 1 week behind?
Okay, go on with that.
Because in Chutz La'aretz, you hold 2 days of Yom Tov, and the last 2 days of Pesach, right, was Friday and Shabbat. So Shabbat was a Yom Tov in Chutz La'aretz, which meant you read the Parsha, the section of the Torah that is read on Yom Tov. But for Israel, since they only have 1 Yom Tov, Shabbat was a regular Shabbos. So you read the Parsha.
So when's it even out?
When did it even? A few weeks.
In a few weeks it'll even out?
Yeah.
Okay, that's why we're having doubles.
Correct. No, having doubles here doesn't help you. Because we move far.
They need a double.
They will do what one Shabbos they'll do double when we don't do a double.
Okay.
And they'll double them up and then they'll be back on.
Well, if I was to go back tomorrow,
Right. They'll do. You're like, I already heard this.
yeah,
I'm good. I'll give the Dvar Torah. I'll do everything. I got it. Yeah.
So for those who kept 2 days Yom Tov in Israel, would they have to search out a different minion?
For what?
Would they themselves be behind?
Technically, they might be.
How does that affect minyan?
For the reading?
Because for the Torah reading on that Shabbos, where you davening in the base medrash, here in the yeshiva they keep 2 days because most of the guys keep 2 days. So if you were here on Shabbat, you kept. Now I don't know what they're doing in the actual. What parsha did they read this week? This previous week? Achrei Mod Kedoshim.
Why did the Talmudim keep 2 days? The Lashon is if you live in Israel.
If you live in Israel and you're not going
here.
back. If you live here and you're not going back. But if you're going back, because you're only coming to learn, then the din is to hold 2 days. The question is, there's some people of Israelis who moved to America, and they're like, we're going back. We're going to go back. Okay, they're going to go back.
So they'll keep one.
They'll keep 1 day, but so you say, okay, so how long? Oh, when are you going back? Oh, when my son finishes college. Oh, really? When is that? Well, he was just born. Guess what? You don't keep 1 day. You have to keep 2 days. Because that's, if you're coming for like a year, if you, let's say you are the state, you're a state employee, right, for the State Department of Israel, right, of Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and you are a diplomat. So that means you're going to go back in a year. So then those people hold 2 days, 1 day.
But if you know you're gonna be here for at least a year.
A year is still 2 days. Listen, we don't make the rules, we just follow them, and we have to learn to love them. That's it. Because you have another day Yom Tov. God gave you an extra blessing. I don't know why. Another meal, another day. I have to be at home and relaxing, and then.
I live off campus. It gets lonely on Yom Tov.
But people do adjust the
I get
rules
bored.
and pick and choose certain ones.
What?
But the rules are adjusted, and people do pick and choose some of them.
That's true, but that's not the goal. The fact that we're not perfect, we're not angels, doesn't make the laws problematic. It just means that we have to step up. You're right. People pick and choose. Correct.
I mean,
But the question is, what percentage are you picking and choosing? If a guy is doing 80% of the Torah and the other 20% he's picking and choosing, I could live with it. But if it's the other way around, it's a bigger problem. Like if a guy picks and chooses Shabbos, kashrus, right? Big things, then you're like, okay, listen, you're going to have a problem.
I was just gonna say, haven't a lot of these things been altered to fit the times, though? The rabbis do.
I
decisions
did
on
that.
it.
I don't think so. That I think that if you look at it in context and you see the historical development of halakha, I think you will see that that's not the case. That's not the case. That is, even in situations where people say, well, turning on the lights is not work. Why can't I just turn on the light? Or lighting fire today, turning my oven, or the heater, that's not. So according to you, that should have been, you update it and so it should be okay. But no, we have the basic principles of what the Torah says, and we apply them to new situation, but it's the same principle. So if the principle of light is similar to fire, let's say, then you're not allowed to. And it's not a matter of how difficult it is. It's a matter of the principle of not igniting fire, period.
I was referencing, I don't mean to go off topic, I was referencing, isn't there like an appointed group of rabbis or, that kind of meet and kind of discuss things that are sort of can go one way or another? They discuss those
Sanhedrin.
things and they-
Sanhedrin, but there is no Sanhedrin in the last 1600 years.
So there was before, but there's nothing like that now.
There wasn't for 1600 years.
We have all this technology back then. Maybe, who knows? But no one could.
But you have poskim. We have people who give you a psak. We have rabbis who will tell you. Right? So for example, I was talking about this the other day, that they've invented, today they're for people who are handicapped, there is a special sort of cart that you can drive on Shabbos. I don't know how it works, but it has and they have a sign on it when they drive it on Shabbos, that this is mutter, you can drive this on Shabbos, it's according to Rav, da 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 da.
It's Strollers too. Strollers.
What's wrong with strollers?
Strollers on Shabbos. There's nothing wrong with that.
No, there's nothing wrong with that when there's no Eruv. If there's an Eruv, you can carry strollers. In America, there's some communities that don't have an Eruv. Do you know what an Eruv is?
I believe so.
It is, sort of a boundary around the community. If there's a boundary, then you can carry within it. If there's no boundary, then you can't carry.
Yeah, strollers carry?
Is it? Yeah?
Yeah.
That's an Eruv.
Broken, the boundary's broken.
Any other non-related questions? Because I love them. I really do. I mean it. I'm not playing. Okay, so let's get started. I want to share with you, before we get going, Rabbeinu Bachya. Rabbeinu Bachya is a commentary on the Chumash. That before each parsha, he gives like a short ethical teaching that is related to the parsha. It sort of kind of encapsulates what the issues are and what we should take away from it before we get started. So he says the following, that Shlomo HaMelech, right? He always starts with Shlomo HaMelech. He says that Shlomo HaMelech said the following verse, Sfatayim ishak meshiv dvarim nechochim. That the lips kiss people who give correct and perfectly fit answers. Okay? Like when you have a question and somebody answers like just exactly what you asked, it's beautiful. So he says, he's talking about a wise person whose words are good for everybody. That whoever listens to him gets something out of it. And they learn something very, very deep in what he's saying. So he says that really the point of wisdom is that it becomes part of you. And wisdom, once it becomes part of you, it sort of shapes everything that you do and informs your decision making, your thought process, your emotions, your relationships, everything. It is sort of all encompassing. And he says, what is it calling? Why does it say about kissing, lips kissing? He says, because this is the highest type of death that a human being can hope for. Because he says it's something that only the righteous experience. That it's called the kiss of death. Like Moshe Rabbeinu, Aaron and Miriam died with the kiss of death. Okay? And that is the highest level that a person can reach. Right? That's why the verse is talking about kissing. And he says that the author, the compiler of the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, also had this type of death. Mitat neshika. There's a Gemara that says that when the soul leaves a body, there's a continuum of what it could feel like. On one end, which is the best end, it's like pulling a hair from a glass of milk. Have you ever gotten a hair out of a glass of milk? How does it come out?
Dripping.
Like this, just very easily. And he says, but the other spectrum, the other end, is like pulling cotton from the plant. Because it gets torn from the thorns and whatever it is. And it's sort of like, and he says that's very, very painful. So you have the kiss is the greatest gift that a person can, the greatest level that a person can reach. Okay. So in the Yerushalmi it says, Kadamach Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya, Yichriz Rabbi Yanai en Kehuna Hayom. When Rabbi Yehuda Nasi passed away, Rabbi Yanai said, there are no more priests. But there are priests, right? There are Kohanim. So what did he mean by that? He says that Kohanim are people, according to the Torah, which we're going to read the first few verses, have a special obligation not to become impure from touching corpses. They cannot be near a dead person. Okay? Did you know that?
Yeah.
Did you know that? Did you? I'm sure you knew that. You knew that, right? He's a Kohen, yeah. Why? Because they are the servants of Hashem. And as servants of Hashem, this is something that they have to remain in a higher level of purity. So what does that have to do with Rabbi Yehuda? Because when Rabbi Yehuda passed away, says Rabbi Yanai, the Kohanim didn't have to fear. They're like everybody else. Why? Because there was no tumah when Rabbi Yehuda died. He was so pure that his body didn't contaminate. And therefore, the Kohanim would be like everybody else. They could come and attend the funeral. Okay. So he says, En keunayom. There is no. So therefore, Kohanim that were involved in the burial, that is, they came to the funeral, were not affected. Because the koach hamashchit, without getting too much into things that Isaac would want me to talk about, is the destructive force.
Would I be able to go there today?
What?
Would I be able to go there today?
No, I don't know. I don't think so. Because there are other kfarim there.
No, I mean like I could go to my grandparents' grave is buried in they're buried in a special place that Kohanim are allowed to.
So if a Kohen, if it's, I don't know, you have to ask. I don't know.
If it's a grave on its own,
No, I don't think so.
And it's just him in there, would I be allowed to go out?
I don't, that's a good question. I don't know.
How'd they know he had no tumor when he died?
What?
How'd they know he had no tumor when he died?
Because of it. Yeah, they knew.
Back then.
They're Tanaim.
Who was he? Sir?
He was the compiler of the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. He died around 300. So about 1700 years ago. So he says that the koach hamashchit, if it's the angel of death that causes your death, you have tumah. If it's Hashem, right, because you're dying from the kiss of death, then there's no tumah.
What about the firstborns in Egypt?
What about them?
Hashem flew over and killed them.
But those were Egyptians. They were not Jews.
But the Jews.
Plus,
there
I
were
thought
also
that
Jews
it was a
that-
case where the angel of death did it, and God forced the angel of death to pass over the Jewish houses. So it's still the angel of death
No,
killing.
it doesn't. It even says in the commentary that it wasn't an angel that did it; that it was Hashem that.
No, Hashem protected.
Try to let the rabbi answer people's questions.
Yeah.
Well, I don't mind. I enjoy this better than me answering.
No, sorry.
As the way that I understood is the firstborn of Egyptians died, not firstborn Jews. And
But not all the
Tuma-
Jews put the blood on their
What?
doorposts.
No, every single one.
remember, the Jews that didn't want to leave Egypt died in the plague of darkness. They were already dead.
Wasn't there a thing where many Jews didn't listen to the warning? Many Jews firstborns died as well. They didn't listen to the warning. The blood. That's something people don't realize.
Now that would have been the case. If they didn't put the blood on the doorpost, they would die. But it's not the question is, it's actually a very interesting question. I don't remember, we'd have to look it up. I can look it up, we'll talk about it tomorrow. What is the relationship between God and if God is doing the killing? The easy answer is that just because God is doing the killing, it doesn't mean that it's a kiss, through a kiss. So if it's through a kiss, then there's no tumah. If it's not a kiss, then there might be tumah. Okay. Now we get started with the chumash. So, impurity. Ask me what impurity is. No, I mean it.
What's impurity?
It's very difficult to know what it is. It's something spiritual. There are people in the world, I just heard a few stories about some big rabbis that actually can feel it. They can feel tumah.
And they've proven that?
What?
And they've proven that they can feel
What do you mean? They say that they do. So,
Can tuma exist in a person who's still alive, or is it only?
Yes. Yes.
So if I go to the bathroom and I don't wash after, they could tell. But I
Yeah.
still have too much.
Yeah.
If I've ever passed the grave, they could tell.
They could tell.
It's better not to ask, bro.
No.
It is something, it is, if we have to remember that the more a person becomes spiritual, the less he's affected by the material world, and he has other senses that he can sense things spiritually. And there are people who are, can feel it. I was told the story of Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, who came with a driver to some wedding hall or something, and he went inside, and the car and his driver was waiting outside. And the driver saw this guy, and he let him in the car, sitting in the front. And they were just talking. And when Rabbi Shlomo Zalman came back, the guy was already gone, right? And he sat in the seat. He said, "No, there's tumah here. I can't sit here." And he sat in the back. So he asked who was in the car. So he told him it was a guy that used to be religious, but then went, completely and is living a very, very immoral life. And he says, "It's good tumah. I can't even sit here." Like, feels it. We don't have this sense. We don't have this sense. There may be a little bit, I don't know if this is even similar, but if you live in a certain neighborhood that people dress a certain way, in terms of modesty, and then you go and you see some in another place where people dress immodest, it really bothers you. Yeah, it's like, what is going on here?
Yeah, I actually had that when I came over here for the last couple of weeks. Whenever I go, whenever like on Shabbat I walk to the Kotel and going through
The robo.
where's the square? There's the river.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of tourists and they're all dressed immodestly and
You see it. It's like,
I switched yeshivas because of that.
so there is the sensitivity that you could see that even people on a low level, we can realize that there's some sort of something going on, something that is different, that is, wait till you go home. I mean, I traveled to the U.S. I was there for 2 weeks on a college campus, and I was like, I can't handle this. It's like, yes, what? Because you put on something. Look,
Wear
You know,
sunglasses that are actually.
I do that. That's what I do. Because if I take my glasses off, I can't see past here. So they could be, I don't know. The challenge is this, though.
Had a great conversation with a tree, I imagine.
Have you heard of Google Glass, the computer glasses?
Yes.
Somebody could, from programmer, could make an app
Just
for
put
that
clothes.
that blurs
Oh.
people. That's brilliant. That's brilliant.
they call kosher glasses.
Just the people.
So,
Yeah.
but the thing is, and I've had opportunity to speak to young girls, college age girls, and some of them say, "Look, I don't want to dress that way, but I don't have a choice, because if I dress like this, like normal, I consider normal, then the guys are not really interested. They're not, and in order for me to get a guy who's interested, I have to dress like that." And I said to her, "What?" So I said, "You know what? It's kind of like immodesty is like manure. You're gonna attract pigs. That's all. But it's very hard because they think it's completely normal, and then we're the abnormal ones." I'll never forget. Like 2 summers ago, we had a JLE, and one guy was telling me that we're sick. Orthodox people are sick because we objectivize women and we turn them into sex objects because all we see is this. I said, "I'm sorry, we do? Like, we use naked girls to sell a watch? Like, we have billboards where the girl is like laying with a bikini with a watch." I remember somebody showed me that. I said, "What is she selling?" It's like, "Well, I don't know what she's selling." I said, "Let's see what the writing is." Like, "A watch." Watch. Right? Why do you need girls to sell a car? Sell a car. And we are the ones that are a problem. So, Hashem Yirachem. Okay. Who's reading the first pasuk? Go.
Hashem said to Moses, say to the Kohanim, sons of Aaron, tell them each of you shall not contaminate himself to a dead person amongst his people.
Okay, so Hashem says to Moshe, tell all the Kohanim, Bnei Aaron. Why does it say Bnei Aaron if it says priests? Isn't it redundant? Right? Aren't all the priests at this stage of the game all the sons of Aaron? So he says, say to the Kohanim, Bnei Aaron. Why do we need both? But they would still be under Kohanim. Right? Just asking. So Rashi explains this. He says there would be some children or sons of the descendants of Aaron that would not be eligible to be Kohanim. So he says Kohanim, and those who are ineligible to be Kohanim, that are still sons of Aaron. And tell them what? Each of you shall not contaminate himself to a dead person among his people. He's not contaminate. Why? So you could say Tumah. Okay, fine, Tumah. We have one Mahalach to say Tumah. But there's another idea here. In the previous Parshas, it tells us about, I'll give you the verse exactly. Verse, it's in chapter 20, verse 6. Verse 6 says, and the person shall turn to sorcery of Ovos and Yidonim to stray after them. I shall concentrate my attention upon that person and cut him off from among his people. What is this type of sorcery? So since we're almost out of time, I will tell you the answer rather than having a discussion. The sorcery involves using corpses. Involving corpses. That is, how did idol worshippers know or try to predict the future? They would use sorcery. They would use corpses in all sorts of ways. They would use corpses of animals, human corpses, babies, all sorts of things. They would do certain things. The Torah is coming to say to the Kohen, you have nothing to do with this type of stuff. What religion worships the dead? Who's the cult of the dead? Who are the people that build these huge buildings? What? Egyptians. Pyramids.
Oh, those are tombs, right?
Yes, but they had this whole thing of the cult of the dead and the book of the dead and the dead and the dead. Mummy, all these things these people are coming out of Egypt, right? And who has the power of the dead? Who did the mummification? They're priests. Comes Hashem and says, you are priests to me. There's no cult of the dead here. There's absolutely nothing. Because remember, it said to us in Parshas Achrei Mot, that all the things that the Egyptians did, and the nation that you're going into, which is Canaan, whatever they did, don't do. And here comes the laws for the priests to tell them that don't touch, don't have any contact with the dead. So much so, that if you're interested, we can talk about this tomorrow, that if a Kohen is sitting on a plane, and the plane flies over a Jewish cemetery,
Plastic wrap. I saw that in the
he is in trouble. Or not.
But the problem with that is you're closer
Me?
to a graveyard. No.
Oh, you said the problem with
A
you.
Kohen, that's the problem with that.
Yeah, you, yes.
A Kohen
you
driving through any city, not trying to be near a graveyard, is going to be closer to a graveyard than a Kohen in a plane flying over.
But the question is, how does this tumah go this way or this way?
I guess that is the question.
If it rises and it goes like this and goes all the way up, if it's like this, then you're right. But it has a limit of how far it goes out.
If you think of just
outward.
distance, like
But it's not just distance.
There are some rabbis that allow you drive drive through if you have your windows. So
Correct.
Does that? I'm saying
If you guys are interested in that, we could actually learn of this plane. You just tell me, and then tomorrow we can talk about that.
or we could do the Chumash.
What- Yeah,
Like another.
it's like a tumah. Yeah.
Like there are those cameras that see infrared and whatever.
Look, if we had the tumah, could you imagine if you had the tumah glasses? You'd see things that you don't want to see. All right, so we'll continue with the parsha, and we won't talk about that. But there's a machlekes whether a plane, is it a closed, is it mekabel tumah or not? It's a machlokes based on the Gemara and the poskim. And there's some who say it's okay, and some who say it isn't. So it really depends. It might not be because you're not over it.
No, the car with the trees coming over it.
So then Mahil, that might be.
There's one road that's like, it's not essential to go through, but it's like a shortcut. I always avoid it.
Yep.
Because you go between